Welcome to the X Project Podcast. This is a podcast of the X Project Substack. To subscribe, please go to thexproject.substack.com. Don't miss The Forest for the Trees. Luke Gromen's comprehensive insights on the US dollar and US Treasury market dynamics. Article number 27, published January 21st, 2023. In this article, the X Project will answer these questions. First, why this article now? Second, who is Luke Gromen? Third, where did his perspective come from? Fourth, what is the top takeaway from his perspective? Fifth, what is another top takeaway? Sixth, what is a third top takeaway? Seventh, what is a fourth top takeaway? Eighth, what is a fifth top takeaway? Ninth, what does the X Project guy have to say? And as always, 10th, why should you care? Section 1. Why this article now? In an era where economic landscapes are rapidly transforming, Luke Gromen's incisive analysis stands as a beacon for understanding the complex interplay of factors shaping our world. His perspective, culled from multiple interviews, resonates profoundly with the mission of the X Project: to unravel the intricate web of commodities, demographics, economics, energy, geopolitics, government debt and deficits, interest rates, markets, and money. As markets oscillate and governments recalibrate policies, comprehending these insights is crucial for investors, policymakers, and the intellectually curious. His perspectives on sovereign debt, energy economics, the US dollar, fiscal dominance, and recession forecasts offer a prism through which we can view the imminent future. Section 2. Who is Luke Gromen? According to his own website, FFTTLLC.com, which stands for Forest for the Trees, quote, Luke Gromen has become one of the most respected names in the global research sector, having been in the industry for 20 plus years and earning a reputation as a client-focused analyst with an unparalleled ability to make broad connections between increasingly siloed industry news and drawing conclusions that help investors understand the bigger picture. Luke offers unique and insightful research derived from a wide variety of sources that provide a clearer picture of global macroeconomic, thematic, and sector trends. Luke founded FFTT LLC in early 2014 to address and leverage the opportunity he saw created by applying what clients and former colleagues consistently described as a, quote, unique ability to connect the dots, end quote, during a time when you saw an increasing siloing of perspectives occurring on Wall Street and in corporate America. FFTT caters to institutions and sophisticated individuals by aggregating a wide variety of macroeconomic, thematic, and sector trends in an unconventional manner to identify investable developing economic bottlenecks for his clients. Prior to founding FFTT, Luke was a founding partner of Cleveland Research Company, where he worked from 2006 to 2014. At CRC, Luke worked in sales and edited CRC's flagship weekly thematic research summary piece, Straight from the Source, for the firm's clients. Prior to that, Luke was a partner at Midwest Research, where he worked in equity research and sales from 1996 to 2006. While in sales, Luke was a founding editor of Midwest's widely read weekly thematic summary, Heard in the Midwest, for the firm's clients, in which he aggregated and combined proprietary research from Midwest with inputs from other sources. Luke Gromen holds a BBA in Finance and Accounting from the University of Cincinnati and received his MBA from Case Western Reserve University. He earned his CFA designation in 2003. End quote. Section 3. Where did his perspective come from? For this article, the X Project analyzed 5 recent interviews with Luke Roman that can be found on YouTube. Number 1, Luke Roman, U.S. Treasury market continues to dictate dollar liquidity policies. January 16th, 2024, with 16,557 views. Second, Luke Roman, the hard landing isn't going to come in stocks, it will come in treasuries. January 11th, 2024, 45,109 views. Third, all-time top guest, Luke Roman, The Forest for the Trees, on inflation, retail investors, precious metals, and Bitcoin. January 9th, 2024, 2,948 views. Fourth, The Debt Bubble with Luke Roman. November 7th, 2023, 33,875 views. And fifth, Macro Voices number 396, Luke Roman, The Dollar Treasury Feedback Loop Deconstructed, October 5th, 2023, 15,630 views. Section 4. What is the top takeaway from this perspective? Global sovereign debt bubble, U.S. Treasury market, and the Fed's third mandate. Here is a quick summary of Roman's macro view. In 2000, we had a stock market bubble. It burst, and policymakers dealt with it by shifting the problem to the banking system with the creation of the housing bubble. It burst, and policymakers dealt with it by shifting the problem to global sovereigns as they backstopped the banking system. And now we have a Western sovereign debt bubble, which is in the process of bursting for the first time in over 100 years. Roman has opined for well over a year now that the Federal Reserve has a third shadow mandate to keep the U.S. Treasury or UST market functioning. And so, in order to fight inflation, the Fed can only tighten so much and for so long as the UST market continues to function. As soon as the UST market becomes dysfunctional, the Fed and/or U.S. Treasury and/or U.S. policymakers injects more liquidity into the system. What does a dysfunctional UST market look like? The X Project looked at that in article number 17. Everyone is missing the point about the Fed's rate cuts in 2024. You should read that article if you haven't already. The punchline is that we've had 5 episodes of UST market stress and/or dysfunctionality in September 2019, March 2020, October 2022, March 2023, and most recently, October 2023. In each case, U.S. policymakers, the Fed and/or U.S. Treasury, figured out a way to inject more liquidity into the system, resulting in a weaker U.S. dollar. What if the Fed and/or U.S. Treasury did not supply the needed liquidity in those situations? Demand for the U.S. dollar would cause it to continue to spike higher. Those who need U.S. dollars would be forced to sell assets, U.S. Treasuries and U.S. equities, to get those U.S. dollars. The added selling of U.S. Treasuries on top of the U.S. Treasury's massive issuance of USTs and the Fed's ongoing quantitative tightening, or QT, to reduce its balance sheet, would add to the overwhelming supply of U.S. Treasuries for which there is not enough demand and/or balance sheet capacity to absorb. The interest rates on U.S. Treasuries would therefore spike higher as the prices of USTs would crash lower. Because USTs are the primary collateral underpinning our hyper-financialized system, the reduced value of USTs would therefore create more demand for US dollars, which would force more selling of USTs, which would lower the value of those USTs further, and round we go, spiraling out of control until it breaks big. This is why there is a third shadow mandate of the Fed to ensure the UST market functioning, which means ensuring the US government is able to finance its ever-growing debt and deficits. Given that we have already seen 5 episodes of things starting to break, we are approaching or already at the limits of the global financial system's ability to continue absorbing US debt. Be prepared for more frequent bouts of UST market becoming dysfunctional, for US policymakers to address it when it does happen, and for US policymakers to do everything possible to avoid that from happening. Section 5. What is another top takeaway? Energy economics and peak cheap oil. The concept of peak cheap oil, central to Groman's discourse, is a crucial pivot in understanding current energy economics. He argues that the age of easily accessible and inexpensive oil has passed, leading to rising costs and reshaping global energy dynamics. This shift is not just an energy sector issue, it's a fundamental financial system issue. The implications are vast, from inflationary pressures to geopolitical realignments. The key takeaway here is that oil prices feed into the dynamic discussed in the section above. Despite efforts by the BRIC nations, the overwhelming majority of international oil is still traded in US dollars. Therefore, the oil trade is a major source of demand for US dollars. Oil importing nations or regions, the European Union, China, India, Japan, South Korea, etc., need US dollars to buy oil. As their demand for oil grows, so does their demand for US dollars. As the price of oil increases, so does their demand for US dollars. This means that as they spend more US dollars to buy oil, fewer US dollars are available to buy US treasuries. Or worse, in some cases, this means that they have to sell US treasuries, adding to the dynamic described above, in order to buy oil. This is why Groman has long said that the only thing that can stop the bursting of the US sovereign debt bubble is an energy productivity miracle, which is not imminent or even on the horizon in the time frame necessary to stop this dynamic. What is the third takeaway? The US dollar. In Groman's view, the US dollar stands at a crossroads, and the X Project will explain which way it'll go in section 9 below. Groman explains the paradoxical nature of the dollar's current strength, suggesting it is a symptom of systemic issues rather than a sign of economic vigor, as explained in section 4 above. According to him, the dynamics of dollarization and de-dollarization in global markets are critical factors shaping the future of international finance. The X Project will write a future article about money and the US dollar, but for today's purpose, it is critical to know and understand that money is created in 2 ways. First, by the Federal Reserve, and second, by banks when they make a loan. And within that second reason lies the second irony, which is that efforts to de-dollarize actually strengthen the dollar in the short term because de-dollarization reduces the growth rate of the supply of new dollars. And this feeds into the strong dollar, weak U.S. Treasury dynamic described in Section 4 above. Groman's examination of the dollar's role in the global economy is a masterclass in understanding how currency power plays in the modern world. Have you figured out yet which way the dollar will go, according to Groman? Section 7. What is a fourth takeaway? Fiscal dominance. As Groman describes, fiscal dominance is the growing supremacy of fiscal policy over monetary policy in shaping economic outcomes. He implies that government spending and deficits are more significant in economic steering than traditional monetary tools like interest rates. This change, Groman suggests, redefines the relationship between government action and market responses. It's a shift that potentially rewrites the rules of economic engagement, and Groman's insights here are particularly prescient. The X Project first introduced fiscal dominance in Article number 6. Then it expanded on the concept in Article number 9, an introduction to inflation, what is its relationship to interest rates, government debt deficits, and fiscal dominance. You should also read these two articles along with Article number 17, which I mentioned above, if you have not already done so. The punchline of the last article is, quote, the U.S. fiscal position is forcing the Fed to stop hiking and will be forcing the Fed to cut rates before inflation is back down to its targets. I wrote an earlier article introducing the concept, but this is what fiscal dominance is, end quote. Section 8. What is a fifth takeaway? No recession in 2024. Contrary to widespread pessimism among many well-respected and experienced economists and macro strategists, Groman offers a contrarian view on the prospects of a 2024 recession. He bases his optimism, if you can call it that, on the fact that deficits greatly expand during recessions, which the U.S. can no longer afford, given everything discussed thus far. He argues that U.S. policymakers will do everything possible to avoid a recession. In fact, we have been witnessing that. Section 9. What does the X Project guy have to say? Do not underestimate U.S. policymakers' creativity in expanding the system's ability to absorb the debt in an attempt to keep kicking the can down the dead-end road ever closer to the brick wall at the end. What is an example of what they can do? An interesting and realistic idea Groman offered in his latest tree ring report is releasing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac from conservatorship. Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae are two government-sponsored enterprises, or GSEs, that help the U.S. housing market by providing liquidity, stability, and affordability to the mortgage market. They buy mortgages from lenders and either hold them in their own portfolios or package them into mortgage-backed securities, MBS, that they sell to investors. This way, they help lenders to create more cash flow and lower interest rates for borrowers, and they also help investors to diversify their portfolios and earn income from the mortgages. Both GSEs went into conservatorship during the financial crisis of 2008 when the U.S. government bailed them out. Groman's idea is that if released from conservatorship, the GSEs could raise 25 to 50 billion in capital to add to their retained earnings of approximately $100 billion, giving them $125 to $150 billion in capital. Given the FHFA mandated capital ratio of 3%, their equity capital could be levered up to 33 times, creating balance sheet capacity of $4 to $5 trillion to buy mortgage-backed securities, which the Fed thinks are effectively fungible with U.S. Treasuries in terms of the liquidity impact of the Fed buying them. The other thing likely to see is more alphabet soup coming from the Fed in terms of various funding programs and mechanisms that will attempt to use all letters in the alphabet except Q and E, despite those forthcoming programs essentially being QE. And in or at the end, understand that this third mandate of the Fed to ensure the U.S. Treasury market functions, or said another way, to keep the government debt machine running in high gear, trumps the Fed's mandate to fight inflation. This means that given a choice between saving the U.S. Treasury market or saving the U.S. dollar, they will choose, and actually have already chosen, to save the U.S. Treasury market at the sacrifice of the U.S. dollar. Of course, this should be no surprise to anyone who read This Time is Different, 8 Centuries of Financial Folly, or the X Project's summary of the book in article number 5, as this is how all fiat currencies ultimately die. In the final section, I will reveal other reasons why you should care about this dynamic and, more importantly, what you could do about it. However, the X Project now requires you to be a paid subscriber to view or hear the final section. In a few articles, the paywall will move up within the article so that only paid subscribers will see the last two sections, or rather, free subscribers will only see the first 8 sections. I will be moving the paywall up every few weeks, so ultimately free subscribers will only see the first 4 or 5 sections of each article. Please consider a paid subscription. All paid subscriptions starting in January will come with a free 30-day trial, and you can cancel at any time. Every month, for the cost of 2 cups of coffee, the X Project will deliver 2 articles per week, helping you know in 1 to 2 hours of your time per month what you need to know about our changing world at the intersection of commodities, demographics, economics, energy, geopolitics, government debt and deficits, interest rates, markets, and money. You can also earn free paid subscription months by referring your friends. If your referral sign up for a free subscription, you get 1 month of free paid subscription for 1 referral, 6 months of free paid subscription for 3 referrals, and 12 months of free paid subscription for 5 referrals. Please refer your friends. Thank you. This concludes the X Project's podcast number 27. Please subscribe to the X Project Substack at thexprojectsubstack.substack.com.